Coming to you from Dover, Ohio and Somerville, South Carolina. Two cities with absolutely nothing in common until now. This is Make Photography Great Again, a weekly podcast of commentary on the photographic industry. And now, here are your hosts, master photographers Christine Walsh-Newton and Ted Linsack.
Well, welcome to the Make Photography Great Again podcast. I am your host along with Christine Walsh-Newton. I am Ted Linsack, of course, the one and only. Christine, let me ask you the title that we used right off the bat. Is it super offensive to you? Because I am I reading too much into it? Because I almost feel like maybe it's super offensive and people won't listen to this because they're offended. Is that true? Or
that's absolutely not true. Okay, so where you're coming from is the whole Trump thing. Now, I'm not a Trump fan, but you know what? Everybody's...
Who's Trump?
Some...
Oh, Trump. Okay,
that guy. You know, here's the thing. He made this little phrase kind of popular. Everybody recognizes it. And when you're in marketing and business, you capitalize on that kind of thing. So Make Photography Great Again suited really well. I know when we discussed it, we just both cracked up, laughed our butts off for a while and said, oh, we so totally have to do this. But you know what? It's not like a cheap shot because that's really what we're talking about. Make photography great again. That's what we've always been talking about because it's kind of lost its sparkle and shine. So I think what we did is we took advantage of a phrase that a lot of people recognize and would go, oh, yeah, you know, and maybe pique some interest. That's all it was.
Are you sure, though, that this podcast isn't secretly being sanctioned by the Trump administration? Do you think this is part of a greater plan to somehow influence photographers and somehow bring them in on this evil plan of world domination? I mean, is that a possibility at least? Or
maybe in your twisted, warped little mind.
Or is the culture and society so hypersensitive to partisan politics that we can no longer even remotely play on words or something because it might be associated to a certain person?
You know what? It's not just partisan politics. It's people just get freaking offended like all the time. Yeah. Come on, people, grow some skin, get some adult attitudes going, and quit being so namby-pamby about everything. Okay, you got me rolling now.
Yeah, well, I think it's a concern on a lot of people's minds. I don't know. People can have their own opinions, I suppose. I think, like you said, people are offended by everything, and they look into everything so much that they can't even get past, you know, trying to just make fun of a slogan or not even really making fun of it. I think we're just bringing it in just because you said it. It's kind of in the pop culture lexicon now, so we thought that's kind of a fun play on words and throw photography in there. And I guess I never thought that I never thought of it as people could possibly be looking at that and say, I cannot listen to that because that's sanctioned by the evil Trump administration. I mean, regardless of how you feel about it, I think it's kind of silly a little bit, but.
Well, you know, honestly, you know, I'm not trying to do hate speech or anything, but I'm not a fan.
Uh-oh.
I'm not a fan of Trump. And when you first brought it up, I'll have to say for like a third of a second, I was like, no. But then the rest of me was like, yes, ha, 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 that is so funny. No, we're just trying to relate to the community at large, the photography community, and they've all heard this. So, you know, if somebody's offended by this, I think you need to find something else to be offended by.
Yeah, there's a lot of other things, though. You can go right down the list, though, possibly. Well, you know, I read this story not too long ago, very random, very, very random, but I thought it was interesting. So I bet you had no idea, but in the state of Virginia, if you wear a mask and you walk out in public and you get caught or someone calls the police department, you can actually be charged with a felony and serve up to 5 years in prison. Did you know that?
I didn't, but what in the world? You are so ADD this morning.
I saw. Well, on the topic of craziness, I saw this story. There was a guy walking down somewhere in Virginia, some town, dressed as the Joker from Batman. Which, of course, there's probably something wrong with this guy. He actually had a sword. Okay, I don't know why he had the sword. Apparently, he wasn't brandishing it, but some bunch of people called the police and they brought him in, and it's actually a felony to wear masks.
Well,
I don't know. I don't know where that came from, but
I heard that.
Is that harsh?
I read that same article, or the same story.
Yeah.
I'm glad they dug up a rule or a law. I'm glad. I hope that they looked really hard and found something, because, dude, I don't want somebody walking down Main Street with a sword and a mask. Seriously, the dude needs
come on.
put
What's
away.
wrong with that? What's wrong with that? I mean, it's a sword. It's a It really wasn't even a mask. And maybe we'll link the story on the Facebook page. Maybe. I don't know. We're linking the most, things that have nothing to do with photography. That's what we're linking on. At some point, we'll link something that has something to do with photography. But he actually had makeup on.
Yeah.
It wasn't really a mask. So how do they classify a mask? I mean, it says mask, yet he had makeup. But they consider that a mask, I guess?
I would say...
What happens on Halloween,
first of
Christine?
all,
What happens
my
on
first
Halloween?
point
That's
is,
my question.
I think they were digging up something, and I would call it a mask, too, to get a guy off the streets with brandishing a sword. Man, I can't talk this morning. Number two... that makeup thing, they may be on to something, because I've seen some really scary people out there with makeup jobs that belong in jail.
Yeah. You get offended by a lot of things, it seems, though. I mean, does makeup offend you now, too?
You know what offends me more than anything in the world? Scented Kleenex.
I didn't even realize they make scented Kleenex. In what sense do they make that? Dare I ask?
They have scents. I don't know. They have the ones with the built-in moisturizer or something, so your little nose stays soft when you're blowing it a lot. I'm offended by that. I think you should have your tissue in one hand and your lotion in the other hand. Don't be putting them together like that.
People don't have time, though. People don't have time to do both. They want everything together. Didn't you notice that we're combining everything? But let me ask you about the scents. Do you know if they have a hibachi scent? I would love to have a Kleenex that essentially smells like I've just walked into a Benihana.
Like a yum yum scent?
A yum yum scent. What's wrong with that? I mean, we have everything these days. Why not have that?
Well, hey, I would write Kleenex and suggest it.
Goodness. So far we've talked about the slogan, Kleenex, and masks. This is an incredible podcast. We're breaking new ground. Let's get to a slightly more serious topic. Not really, because photography... Can we really call photography a serious topic these days? Somewhat. So,
absolutely.
In your career, let me ask you this big question. Was there a moment, or can you recall a moment, probably early on in your career, that you looked at your work and you looked at where you were to that point, and you realized that I suck? Did you realize when you sucked?
Yeah, it took me a while. I had some experience under my belt in the newspaper industry. And after, 4 or 5 years of working for them, you're out you're covering stories left and right, and you getting bylines in the paper, and people are seeing your name, and they're starting to recognize you when you're out shooting, and they're approaching me saying, would you shoot weddings? Would you shoot my son's senior pictures? And, the person in me was like, well, yeah, that's more money. And at one point I lost my job. I was downsized, I didn't get fired or anything, but I lost my job, and I was sort of wondering what in the world I was going to do next. And I had been doing photography, on the side for a number of years. So I thought, well, maybe I'll just transition that into a full-time endeavor. And I thought, well, I'm really going to need to pick up studio photography and learn that. And that right there was when I realized that I did not know what I was doing. I thought I had everything figured out, and looking back now, I realize I really didn't know anything when I was a newspaper photographer. So, yeah, learning studio was the big turn for me.
When you got, I think at some point you told me that in many conversations, when you first got your first set of studio lights, that you had no clue, like you just kind of put them around the house or put them around your studio or whatever you had as, I think, what's the term that you use? You put them around like lamps or
yeah,
something?
I arranged them like living room lamps because
lamps, yeah.
I thought the point was just to kind of light the space up, and of course I flat lit everything when I did that, but it was really crazy. I had decided, in all my foolishness, I had decided that I had a $200 budget for lights. And go ahead and laugh, get it out of your system.
I don't even think that my grid for my 36-inch pro photo cost $200.
I know.
It's like twice that, I think.
I know. When I finally got my act together, my very first light was like double that, and that was my first light. So I've spent way more than that since then. But yeah, I bought these used lights off of eBay and from some other photographer, don't even remember who they were. And they sent me, I don't know, 3 or 4 lights. And when I got them, I plugged them in and I was doing the little test button thing. And one of them didn't work. So I wrote them and I said, well, this one doesn't work. So they said, well, we'll send you another one. We're so sorry. We'll send you another one that's pretty similar.
Wait, when you wrote that, was this so long ago that you actually wrote a letter, or had email been invented yet?
Oh.
When was this? What year was this?
I am so offended by what you just said.
I guarantee you won't. I guarantee now you will not share this podcast because it is incredibly offensive. But continue.
Well, no, it was an email. And so they wound up sending me another light, and it was a totally different brand. And the original light that I had, I don't remember the brand, but what it was the flash tubes were built in, and when they burnt out, you had to throw the light away. That's how cheap and old they were. It was ridiculous. So they sent me this other light that wasn't even the same brand. I couldn't get them to trigger each other. Anyway, I just quit using it, and I thought, well, I'll just go with these ones that work. And so then I had to buy light stands, finally figured out that I had to figure out a way to set them up. And then I started trying to use them, and I couldn't figure out how to make them go off with my camera. And then that's when I learned about pocket wizards or triggers. I guess I didn't afford pocket wizards till later.
How long was Dwight standing there and you said, I'm about to take the photo, get ready to hit the button on the light? Did that happen a bunch of times, or did you?
No.
On three.
I try to work through all the problems before I reveal myself to anyone publicly because I can't stand the shame. But, it took me a long time.
All 12 people that are listening to this will now hear it, so.
Yeah. Well, I'm over it now. Yeah. I can laugh about it now. It's a lesson to, some newbies that might be listening. But anyway, then I learned about triggers and I started using those. And then I learned about soft boxes. I had no modifiers on these lights and I didn't know they were supposed to have them. So the learning curve was just horrible for me. And even by the time I got all the equipment figured out, I still didn't know what I was doing. It was horrible.
Yeah, it's a silly question in a way, but I think it's pretty important to anyone that's going to grow in their craft. You have to come to that realization, I feel fairly early on, that I suck, that other people are doing a lot better than me, and I need to figure out how to grow, how to find the education that I need to become a better photographer. You have to come to that realization. I think a lot of people that get stuck or that start within the first couple of years and don't realize that my work doesn't look the same as a lot of people who have been doing this for years and years and years. And I'm not saying that we all start horribly. Some people I feel are more artistically inclined and all that, but you have to come to that realization that I need a kick in the pants, right? And I need to start changing things if I want to become a professional and really be someone that understands the craft of photography in an intimate way. I think that's the first key moment that you have. And I find a lot of photographers have that I've talked to, so that's kind of why I ask. It's interesting you talk about the lights. So the first wedding we shot was in 2006, and I'll never forget, we bought, similar to you, I bought some cheap lights on eBay, and it was the same deal. I think the company was called Brightech. I don't even know if they're around, but they were very, very cheap. I think I bought 2 or 3 mono lights for like a couple $100. I remember they all came in. It was our first wedding. So if you can imagine this, in December, the end of December, if I remember correctly, I believe it was Rachel's 21st birthday, as lame as that was. That was the first wedding we shot on Rachel's 21st birthday. But we got these lights. They came in maybe a week before, and I rented pocket wizards from Dodd Camera in Cleveland. And I'll never forget. So Rachel had started with the bride a little bit earlier. So this is a December wedding. The ceremony was, I think, at 5 or 6 o'clock. Okay, so do the math. It was inside an embassy suite somewhere downtown on the east side of Cleveland, I believe. So the ceremony was pitch black, dark, and all that. But before then, Rachel had started early, and I wasn't supposed to start with the groom till 3 or 4 hours down the road. So I'll never forget, I got these pocket wizards, and I'm in our apartment, and I'm trying to get them to work with these lights. And if you know anything about those cheap lights, like you mentioned, they are notorious for being all over the place, especially back then, 10, 11, 12 years ago, with not syncing quite correctly with the pocket wizards. Like, they were very goofy. So I'm sitting there and I'm desperately trying to get this stuff to work, and I have like 3 hours before. I mean, it was a disaster. It was an absolute disaster. I remember we had just gotten our first cat, Mies. She was like a kitten, and she was going crazy. I'll never forget. She's running all over and jumping off the curtains and all this stuff, and I'm sitting there desperately like praying that I can get these lights to work. I mean, it's amazing what we go through as photographers in our initial stages, isn't it?
Yeah, earlier you said about having to realize that you suck, and you do need to come to that realization. But it did take me a while, and the reason it did was because you talked about looking at other photographers and comparing your work to them and realizing that they were so much better than you. It depends on who you're hanging out with. I didn't really look at other photographers that were really, really great. What I was doing was hanging out in a forum of other newbies, and I was comparing my work to theirs, and they were as equally bad as I was. But I didn't know that, and I thought we were all good. And my world of photography was very, very tiny then. And it took me a long time until actually I started getting into professional organizations, and I started expanding my viewpoint and looking further out around me than just my little buddies that we were all learning together. And that's when I became mortified. And I was like, oh my gosh, I should just sell everything now and go back to taking pictures of my cats, because this is not going to work. I do suck. And it was an embarrassing moment in my life. It was a tough period, probably a couple months worth of really, really struggling. And, every day going, I don't know if I can do this, so frustrated with all the equipment and all the settings. And, but if you can work through that, persevere through that, and really start learning, then it all starts to fall into place and you don't suck so much. So that's awesome.
So you said you were in your own little group of newbies. Is there anybody that you particularly saw outside of that group, any well-known photographers or someone that you saw that their work was incredible that maybe really was the catalyst for you kind of examining your own work? Was there anybody's particular work that really stood out that was like, wow, my work looks nothing like this. How do I do that?
I'm getting shivers right now because I do remember that moment. It was at the 2010 Mid-East States Convention in Dayton, Ohio, sponsored by the Professional Photographers of Ohio. It was my first convention, and my very first class, 9 o'clock in the morning, was Gabriel Alonso. And
yes.
I believe he's from Texas. Is that right?
I think so. Yep.
But he is a traditional children portraiture person. Actually, he does all kinds of portraits, but this particular class was about children. And I just remembered sitting there looking at all those beautiful, beautiful images up on the screen and just darn near crying at the total beauty of them. And I became a great Gabriel Alonso fan, probably embarrassingly so. But I started really, really looking up to his work. And then I started to see, I looked at his website, and then I kind of stalked him on Facebook and saw who, his friends were. And another one that really was an early inspiration was Tim Kelly. And to this day, Tim Kelly is one of my favorite photographers. I actually got to spend 3 days with him last year on my birthday. It was my birthday present to myself, and I actually had my portrait made by him, and I can see it from where I'm sitting right now. It's my prized possession.
Oh, that hurts. That hurts so much because I thought that the portraits that I did were your prized possession. Oh, goodness.
Oh, no, that was rotten. Okay, I can't see yours from here, or I would have remembered that. But okay.
That's a double burn. I can't see yours from here because it's in the bathroom above the toilet. That's where we hung your portrait.
Please let me save myself. Directly across from where I'm sitting is an 11 by 14 matted to a 16 by 20 of my Tim Kelly portrait. But across it, behind me, where I can't see it, is a 24 by 36 canvas of the one you did for me. So
that almost saved it. I'm getting my eraser out. I have my pad next to the desk here. I'm keeping track of how many times I've been offended so far. And this podcast, I'm erasing the last little pencil tick that I made. I'm erasing that.
Okay, should I talk about the 2040 canvas that's above my bed that you did?
Oh my goodness. Okay, well then I may fully erase it if that's the case.
Okay. I think I'm safe now, right? And there's a bunch in the queue. As soon as I get some more money, we're getting another canvas. You know that.
Uh-oh. See, now you're overcompensating for. It's okay. I get it. Tim Kelly, he's always going to take first place. I'm right behind him, right?
You're almost as good as Tim Kelly. How's that?
Oh, my goodness. That's cool, though, to be able to have that moment. I think I had that same kind of moment. Generally, early on, there was a period, and I think everyone goes through this as well, where you think you're amazing, which it's not based in any logic at all, but you first start tinkering in Photoshop, and the first time you do spot color, at least for me, that was one of the first things I did in Photoshop, and I thought it was incredible. Okay, so I think I went through this phase, and I remember the first few albums I designed when I was like playing with album design for some of the weddings we were shooting. I remember making these hideous designs in Photoshop, and when I teach a 4-day class, I usually bring out the first 2 or 3 albums the first 3 weddings that we ever shot, and then the album designs from them. And they're horrible. I mean, they're horrible. But at the time, I thought they were incredible. I remember designing some of this stuff, and I can remember me sitting there at the desk and calling Rachel. And we had this little 1-bedroom apartment, and our little computer was in the bedroom. And I'd call her in and say, "Look at this amazingness that I've done! Isn't this so cool?" And I thought I was like crazy, crazy good.
Oh, and I bet you used a lot of Scriptina font, didn't you?
Scriptina is instant logo. That's all I'm going to say. It's instant logo. It's instant logo. I'm just saying that. Yep. So where was I going with this? So I went through that period where I did think I was really good, but one of the first workshops that I went to was a Jerry Guionis and a Bambi Cantrell workshop. They actually toured together. And this was back in Cleveland, I think in 2007. So it was roughly a year after we started, maybe just short of a year. And that was the first time I was exposed to photography in like a whole new sense. I mean, I had been seeing it up till then, obviously. I had been seeing some well-known people, but that full-day workshop, man, I saw art. I saw images where everything was clicked into place. And I finally started getting in my head, wow, when you're good at this, you can actually explain an image. There's a point for everything. You're not just out there shooting. Because up until then, I had this idea, well, you go out there and you take a lot of frames, and eventually everything lines up, and that was kind of my thinking. And that was the first point where I said, you know what? I need to be more proactive at this. I thought, how funny is this? I thought I knew lighting. Isn't that hilarious? I've been doing it for less than a year. Oh, yeah, I know lighting. Yeah, lighting. As long as it's cloudy, it's good. That was my thinking at the time. And I sat through that, and I began to see, wow, sunlight being used for portraits and video lights and off-camera flash and these really dramatic compositions. That was the first time I was exposed to that. And Bambi talking about posing in a very methodical way, it was really cool to see that. And it was kind of that first moment where my mind opened up and I realized there's a lot more to this than I realized. And that was the point, too, that I started looking at their work and I looked at my work, and it was the first realization I had that something looks different about their work. It doesn't look like mine, and I like it. I like what they're doing, but how do I do that? How do I replicate that? Because mine doesn't look like that. That was kind of my moment, and I think a lot of people get stuck with not exposing themselves to exposing themselves. That probably doesn't sound right.
I'm so offended.
We're at like a dozen things that people. Okay, I need another notebook at this point. They don't expose themselves to other photographers, and they stay in their own little cliques. That's a great point that you made. So get out. There's nothing wrong with the local group, but some people just stick in that group, and they never get out of it, and they don't realize that there's a whole world out there. There's people that are incredible and doing amazing things in photography, not only photographically, but business-wise too. With their sales techniques and marketing techniques, we can learn so much if we get out of that local bubble sometimes. I mean, would you agree with that, or what do you think?
Oh, I totally agree with that. And I have another point to make. When I had sat in that Gabriel Alonso class, and was really overwhelmed with all the goodness that he was showing us, I still didn't quite make that connect because he was a big esteemed teacher, well known, and he was up there. I didn't really think that people on my level could be that good. I thought he was like, the god of photography or whatever you want to call it. So it took me a while to realize that the normal average photographer can be that good. And my shining moment of that realization I hate to keep talking about competition, but the very first competition I went to, it was actually that same convention. I had volunteered to work in the print room. And so, I walked in and I dropped off my case. And back then there was probably 100 cases because there was like a bunch of states competing all together. And we were still doing prints. They didn't have digital back then. So I had volunteered to be in the print room. And as I put on my little white gloves and they taught me how to open the case and take out the paperwork and unpack the prints. And then I started looking at the prints. And all these gorgeous prints were coming out of these cases. And as I'm looking at these gorgeous prints, my stomach is sinking and sinking and sinking. And I was really, really, really trying to figure out a way to get out of my job and go get my print case and slip it out of the pile and take it out to my car. I was so embarrassed of my work at that point because I thought, oh my gosh, look, all these people, they're members like me and they're just doing all this stellar work. And I think that was probably one of the biggest moments where I realized that I was not up to snuff.
So we're kind of talking about when we started and having that kind of moment where you realized that you sucked and then growing from that more in terms of early stages of your career. But what about now? What do you think about photographers that have been doing this for a while? Do you think, well, maybe I'll ask you, have you had another moment like that maybe has pushed you into expanding your craft and maybe areas that you had not anticipated or just growing a little bit? Do we still have those moments as we go, or is it just really that one moment and then we're refining things, or are you still kind of critical? Do you have these epiphanies of, wow, I suck maybe now at this and I need to refine that? Do you have those moments still?
Yeah, I do. For a long time, I've been shooting, black and white character portraits is sort of my bag, and I've gotten really good at portraits, I think. And this year for competition, I decided to break out of my box, and I actually was lighting a scene. And I was really, really struggling. Obviously, I can light one person or two people really well, but when it comes to lighting a scene and trying to tell a story, I don't know what I'm doing. I shot an image 7 different times for comp this year, and it really never came out right. And so I struggle regularly on different things, but I think that you have to try different things to come to those realizations. If you stay in your box all the time and only work on the things that you like to work, then you're going to stop growing at some point. You're going to think that you know it all. You're at the top of your game. So if you spread your wings and try different things, I think that will create challenges for you.
Yeah, I think it's pretty easy to hit a wall like that if you get in that comfort zone. And I don't think that we should probably be martyrs of our own work, like constantly looking at our stuff and saying, oh my God, I could have done this and I could have done that. But I think to regularly analyze your work and sit down and try to kind of critique yourself a little bit, obviously get some critiques outside of your own viewpoint, but always be looking at your stuff and looking at what I can improve. I think if you get to a point where you start to get comfortable, and I say this to students all the time, you go through a few month period where you're looking at all your work and thinking, wow, I'm amazing. There's nothing wrong with anything. That to me is a little bit of a dangerous point because it stops your growth. And you get to a point where you think you've learned it all and you're good, but there's no such thing as a perfect image, right? There's no such thing as a perfect business, is there?
No, I don't think so. I think you can look at some stuff and say, I just really don't know what to fix here. But I don't think it's in any way perfect. But one point that we have to consider is we really have to ditch the ego. You have to be able to look at your work objectively and really kind of get critical. And I know one of the things that I did finally after a couple years of, thinking I was hot crap with, the headshot business, I started getting really honest with myself, and I didn't know how to pose hands. I avoided putting hands in pictures for the longest time because I didn't know what to do with them. And so I had to give myself that little lecture and go, well, Christine, you really don't know everything there is to know about portraits because you are, avidly avoiding this particular kind of thing. So, there was a year where that's all I did is I put hands in every single picture and really refined my technique as far as that went. So I think that if we ditch our ego and we're honest with our skill set and we actually look to see if there are things that we can improve on, that we'll be in a lot better place.
Yeah, I agree with that. There's always something to work on, and ego does get in the way. It definitely gets in the way, especially of people getting critiques in general. And we may have talked about this already, but it comes up so often. I see so many people that are scared to death of getting critiques, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just part of the process. You have to be willing to kind of lay your stuff bare there and say, yeah, give it to me, and let me know where I can improve, because that's the first step all the time, is to realize that.
Well, the bad part is in the beginning, and I did this too. When you get a critique, you take it as criticism against you, the maker, and that's not it. We are looking at this particular image and the kind of job that you did at this point in time. And if I point out, well, your lighting's not quite there, I'm not saying that you're a bad photographer and you should quit. I'm saying your lighting wasn't quite there. The next time you shoot this, try this. I'm not making a judgment call on you or your ability. I'm just showing this, technique improvement could be used here. But so I think in the beginning, when you ask for critique, you really have to kind of separate your feelings out from it and know that I'm just giving you a little lesson to help you do this better. And if you want to be a better photographer, you will listen to this lesson and not get all bristly with me because I've shown you something that wasn't perfect. That picture wasn't perfect, or you wouldn't ask me to tell you about it. Or maybe you wanted me to gush. I don't know. But if you're going to ask me for a critique, I'm going to give you a critique, and then you better accept the critique as it was given.
I know secretly when I show you my work for comp and I want some suggestions, I'm always secretly hoping you're going to tell me it's a good image. And when you don't, I cry just a little bit inside.
Oh,
just FYI.
Ted.
Just FYI.
Your stuff is always good, and you don't really...
That's what I was angling for you to tell me that.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Don't you love when people do this? And I've done it probably at some point. Someone posts something like on social media, and it's all angled to get the sympathy comments. When people do that, like, here's this image I took, and it's just, I don't know, there's just something wrong with it. I'm so inadequate as a photographer. And then you read 180 comments. No, this is amazing and you're great. And isn't that hilarious when people do that? I've done it before. I mean, I'll admit it's happened. But people want that. Am I allowed to say this? Is this hit a button? Are you feeling a little guilty now, or is that what it is?
I'm not feeling guilty, but I'm wondering why in the heck you're putting your work out there in a public place and asking for input on it. Honestly, the worst thing that you can do is slap your work on Facebook and then take all the comments from people, because number one, your family and friends are going to say they love it. The people that really don't know photography that well are going to love it. And the people that can give you good critique and tell you really what you need to improve on, they don't hang out on Facebook. They're busy making money.
Now, you said something just a little offensive, because that's the theme of today's episode. You sort of insinuated that there are certain people that maybe are more, qualified to comment on photography over others. I always thought that photography is one of these things that anyone could really look at and be able to critique or give you some feedback on. Have I been wrong all these years?
Yes. You can certainly show your work to whoever you want to show it to, but you need to pick your audience. If you just want to know if this is pretty, show it to people that can tell you if a picture is pretty or not, or give you their opinion. But when you want a critique on your skill set, go to somebody that is learned and knowledgeable and educated and maybe even a teacher. Go to the best person that you can find, because otherwise you're just flinging it out there and... Oh, I don't know. This is sort of a pet peeve for me because, there are times, and I should just stop doing this. I will, somebody will put up a critique, an image, they'll want some critique, and specifically if they ask for lighting, because I kind of think that I know a little, lighting seems to be my strong point in my opinion. So if somebody asks for lighting critique, I try to participate in that kind of discussion. And it's really funny when I take the time to really adequately, fully critique the lighting on an image, and then somebody else will come along and they'll totally disagree with everything that I said. And they'll say, well, my favorite is this, and oh, this one's really pretty. And then, the person that asked for critique loves this other person and hates me, but they didn't bother clicking on either one of our profiles to see that I have all these letters behind my name, and this person owns a Canon Rebel.
Ouch.
Yeah,
Ouch.
well,
Ouch.
hello.
Ouch.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm trying really hard.
I own a Rebel, and I shoot all my weddings on a Rebel, so I'm not sure what you're trying to say.
You know,
Can you expand that? Can you expand that a little bit?
I'm just, how about this? Today's theme is being offended, and I'm offended by that.
Today's theme is pretty much getting rid of the rest of the audience that we have after people listen to this.
Yeah, anybody who's raise your hand if you're listening, right?
Oh my goodness. It's a good discussion. It's a good discussion that we need to have because people need to be open about these things if they want to get better. That's the whole point, right? I think the first episode we talked about a lot of what we want to talk about are things that don't get mentioned a lot, in public. Or we don't have these discussions out in the open, but we got to be open with ourselves. If we want to grow as photographers, as an industry, I think these are worthwhile topics. I think we're going to wrap up with that, though. What do you think? Unless you have a amazing thing to add here at the end.
You know, I did have one little thought, and I thought about this the other day. When we have new photographers, or when we are new photographers, we go right out there and we just dive in and we start doing work, et cetera, et cetera. And everybody, not everybody, but, sometimes people give you a little bit of leeway because you're new, et cetera. But compare it to a musician. Specifically a vocalist. And I used to actually sing. I had a band, and I took professional training lessons. And when you're in the music industry and you are just learning your first song, you don't go and schedule yourself a concert. If you get up on stage and you can't even hit a high C, or you can't stay on tune, or you don't even know all the words yet and you're reading them off of a paper, baby, you are not ready to be there. Go home and practice, But why in the photography field do we find that acceptable for people with very little skill to start into the industry? We would not accept that in any other industry.
And we all start at that point, but you make a valid point there. You have to learn your craft, at least get the foundation set before you, if anything, start taking paid gigs.
Right.
Yeah, that's my advice, and it's not very popular anymore. The last few workshops I did, someone asked something about, when I'm starting, what should I do? Should I apprentice, or what should I charge? Or all these questions from people that are brand new, and I say, you should not be taking any money from anybody for at least probably 1.5 to 2 years is what my advice is, if you're coming into it fresh. Now, I'm not saying if you've been a portrait photographer for 20 years and now you're trying to get into weddings, that's a little bit of a different situation. But especially with weddings, though, you have to have that experience. That is terrifying to jump into a situation like that and not know what you're doing. And like you said, we see it all the time. A lot of forums, a lot of people with good intentions, but they take a lot of gigs, and then you see these questions, and it makes me think, man, you shouldn't have taken that. You can't take something and then go out there trying to look for all the answers. Learn the stuff first. Get the foundation. You will be a lot less stressed as well if you go in that direction rather than, I'm taking the gig and I'm booking the weddings and I really have no clue how to do this, but I'll figure it out. Do not go that way. Danger, Will Roberts. Danger.
It's Will Robinson.
Will Robinson. Sorry. It's early, okay? It's early.
I'm offended by your ignorance of Lost in Space.
I'm on 4 pads of paper right now with all the offensive things. So, if you guys want to listen to past episodes or check out what we are doing for the most recent episode, obviously when this one airs, it will be on our website. You can find that at the uber offensive term, Make Photography Great Again podcast.com. That is Make Photography Great Again podcast.com. Of course, you can find us on Facebook if you search for the same. We will post episodes and links to various topics on that Facebook page and all the other social media accounts as well. Twitter, Instagram, we're on there everywhere, so check that out. If you want to contact us, how would they do that, Christine?
On the main page of our uber offensive URL, we have a contact form. But if you're offended by the show, don't send us a note.
Yes, or we'll direct those to you, Christine, so you can read those, right? Anything that's negative goes right to Christine, so I don't ever have to see it, yeah. Well, that's it for now. Enjoy the week, and we'll catch you guys on the next episode.
All right, bye-bye.
You have been listening to Make Photography Great Again with Christine Walsh-Newton and Ted Linzak. Come back next Tuesday for a brand new episode. For more information and access to the podcast archive, please visit our website, MakePhotographyGreatAgainPodcast.com.